The wind was the sole voice remaining in that abandoned town. It howled through broken windows and groaned along doors that hadn't been opened in years. Caleb Boone had grown accustomed to it like a man becomes accustomed to scars. First it sliced deeply, but in time it just became a part of him. His boots kicked up dust as he trudged along the deserted street. A street that had previously echoed with children's laughter and peddlers hollering their wares. Now there existed only the sound of his own footsteps and the occasional squawk of a raven. Caleb had been living in silence for years. The ghost town was more than just an empty location now. It had become a metaphor for his own banishment. He was 30 and felt twice as old, exhausted by remorse and isolation. Each day was the same. Mending the corral, testing the well, collecting firewood from the ridges. He talked to no one but his horses, dedicated animals who had turned ghostly themselves in his presence. And each evening, under a star-studded desert sky, he sat with a tin cup in front of him, again wondering the same thing. Why am I still here? The answer never materialized, just the pain of memory. He'd once been held in esteem, a rancher with land, cattle, and pride. But pride had been his downfall. Violence had destroyed it all. Now, people whispered his name, a caution of what destruction looked like. Caleb Boone, the rancher who lost everything. And then one night, as the sun curved low and heat shimmered across the horizon, something moved. A man stood there, thin against the boundless desert. Caleb had thought for a moment it was a mirage, the sort a solitary man conjures after too many hours gazing at nothing. But as the figure approached, his heart accelerated in a manner it hadn't in years. He rested against the post, shading his eyes. The desert never gave anything away. And here she was, walking doggedly towards the town. A young woman, hair as black as a raven's wing, clothes worn from the road, steps heavy but unrelenting. She stood with a dignity no fatigue could reach. Caleb caught his breath. Years of isolation, and her presence was almost holy. But warning welled up in him like a reflex long practiced. Who was she? Why here? When she arrived at the well, she eased the bucket down with practiced ease, drank long, and then regarded him straight on. Her dark eyes met his without so much as a spark of fear. Caleb recognized then this was not chance. She hadn't sought just water. She was looking for shelter, though from what, he had not yet surmised. He came forward, his rough voice from years of not being used. "You can rest," he quietly stated. "There is shade, and plenty of food." She regarded him, gauging him in silence, as if she could see beyond the words that came out of his mouth and into the man he used to be. And then, with a minimalist nod, she accepted. No thanks, no words, only the simple gesture of lowering herself to the porch and breathing, as if finally in days she was able to get some air. That was enough thanks. Caleb had brought her water, bread, and a piece of dried venison. She ate slowly, guardedly, as though each bite should be measured against pride. As the darkness gathered at night and the fire popped between them, the quiet grew dense. Caleb, who had once been a man of many words, now found words heavy. But it was she who broke the silence at last. "My name is Ayanna," she replied, her voice steady, unmoved. He allowed the name to hang in the desert air before responding, "Caleb Boone." Another silence, but a gentler one this time. The space between them shifted, electric with nothing more than presence. Caleb started to see things he hadn't realized he could see again. The tough beauty of her hands, the weight of history in her eyes. A curiosity roused him. What path had led her to his doorstep? She remained in the days that followed. She repaired her moccasins by the flames, collected wild herbs along the riverbed, and ate in silence alongside him. Bits of her history filtered through the cracks of talk. She had abandoned her people, driven out by hushed whispers and censure, by a whispered cruelty she would not even voice aloud. Sorrow and defiance burned within Ayanna's eyes. Caleb realized it at once, for he bore the same sort of burden. Shame indelibly stamped in his heart. Both were outcasts, scarred along divergent paths, and yet somehow drawn to this same forgotten town. And gradually the town came back to life. She swept away dust from vacant doorways. He repaired roofs that had long since collapsed. They both kindled small fires of grace in a world that had forsaken it. Caleb saw her one morning when a horse bumped against her for grain. She laughed, not boisterous, but sufficiently to ring out through the empty streets, to fill corners that had seen only emptiness. At that moment, Caleb understood just how famished he had been for the beat of another human heart. Not all who walked through was kind, though. Strangers with whiskey kisses on their lips flashed sly smiles at Caleb, speaking hard things about the rancher who lived with an Apache woman. Shame and condemnation seeped through the air like smoke, waiting to smother what little life they had reestablished. Caleb would remain by the window after such meetings, fists clenched, caught between anger and the old fear that had paralyzed him for years. He longed to protect her, to stand tall, but the specter of failure urged him that he was not worthy. Nevertheless, Ayanna walked with unshakable pride, her dignity greater than any affront. And in her wake, something in Caleb started to shift. The test arrived sooner than either of them had anticipated. Under a pale, bone-white moon, a pack of drifters rode in. Their laughter was bright, their eyes unkind. They insulted Ayanna, belittling her heritage, belittling Caleb for being alongside her. The town, so still for so long, suddenly seemed prepared to burn. Caleb's fingers shook as he clutched his rifle. His heart howled to save her, but fear sneered at him, saying he was still that same broken man who had lost everything. Then Ayanna moved forward, unshaken. Her chin was high, her eyes blazing like flames. She needed no words. Silence was her shield. Something in Caleb broke then, not in defeat but in letting go. For the first time in years, he made a choice. He moved to her side, rifle low but unyielding, his voice hard as stone. "Leave." The drifters mocked him at first, but when they gazed into his eyes, their taunting dwindled. Caleb was no longer a man tormented by destruction. He had picked his spot, and something far more vital, he had picked her. That decision had a strength they couldn't reach. Grumbling and spitting on the ground, the men at last rode away, their curses dying in the darkness. Later, Caleb's hands continued to shake. He put aside the rifle, abashed by the weakness clinging to him. But Ayanna took hold of him, resting his hands in hers. Their gazes met, and in that silence lay a promise greater than words. Caleb spoke softly, hardly daring to voice it. "Stay. Stay with me." She said nothing, but held her hand in his, warm and firm. That was sufficient. Seasons passed. The ghost town evolved with them like a wound healing into scar over time. Gardens sprouted up. Roofs remained strong against rain. The old saloon, thick with drunken singing and shouting before, now hummed softly with Ayanna's voice while she labored. They wed in secret under the stars, not with rings and ritual, but with eyes and the unsaid power of days together side by side. Caleb, who had thought himself irreparable, discovered that he was whole again, not by forgetting his history, but by creating a life with the woman who had emerged from the desert and into his exile. Sometimes in the evening, he would sit and observe the golden dust swirling against the horizon, wondering how near he had come to living and dying in silence. Rather, fate had offered him a second chance, at dignity, at belonging, at love. And to the one who is hearing this now, maybe years from now, may their own story be a lantern. Even in a location the world has left behind, where shame and silence are cumbersome friends, two lost hearts can still meet. And when they decide to stand together, that decision becomes the strongest haven a heart ever knows.